Hello everybody, and welcome to Kill Your Darlings. My name is Aletta van Vietinghoff. I'm a film editor, and I'm also the coordinator of the editing studio, which is the program that is taking place during Talents for the first field of work editors. We have a nice group of 13 people this year, and I'm here to present or introduce you to Susan Korda. Susan Korda is a long-time mentor of the editing studio. She's an award-winning filmmaker, an editor, a producer, a director, and a writer. These days, she's mostly working as a story consultant. She's teaching all over the world, and she's a professor at Columbia University in New York. She believes in the gods of the editing room. You'll hear about that. And I really like a quote that she might do again later on, I don't know. She says, "Since watching someone edit is about as interesting as watching paint dry, I like to talk about it." So please welcome Susan Korda.
Thank you. Hi. So I usually like to get a feel as to who I'm talking to. Please, a show of hands. How many of you are producers? Thank you. Producer-directors? Directors? Writers? Writer-directors? Writer-directors, editors? Few hands go up. Editors? Ooh, thank you. Production designers? Right, here to find out what the fuck we do with your stuff, huh? Why are you cutting all the best parts out? Musicians, composers. Right, you know where the composers are? They're with Hulder, where I would rather be too. No, I'd like to be with you, but I'd love to be, you know, in the music of Joker and Chernobyl. Cinematographers. And cinematographers, directors? Interesting. So a lot of crossing over, right, that's happened in this digital age. What am I leaving out? Sound designers. Excellent, thank you. And anyone that I did not mention? Regular people. Yes? Yeah, what are you? A scientist. Well, this is going to be interesting. Okay, so I'm going to start with, one other question. How many of you hate the editing room? Oh, there's somebody there. Thank you for admitting it, right? It's torturous, right? How many of you tolerate the editing room like it's a necessary evil? Thank you. And how many of you love the editing room? Oh, mishpucha, you know, my peoples. Anyway, for those of you who only tolerate it or think it's a necessary evil, I hope this is going to kind of expand your view into it and give you some how-tos. Because when we go into the editing room, I like to say what we end up, it's the chickens come home to roost, but we end up in a kind of creative autism. Like everything, you know, with autistic people, everything comes in at the same valence. It's really intense. And whether it is a boom shadow or a badly spoken line of dialogue, it all seems to be of equal impact. And we get very, well, rational. But let me start with the title of this. Oh, there it is. Kill Your Darlings. Kill Your Darlings was said by William Faulkner. He warned his writing students not to get too attached to any part of what they wrote, because it would actually misalign the rest. So you have to be ready to kill what you love best, even if it's what got you here in the first place. Danny Boyle's has a ritual where he actually takes, and you know, Danny Boyle's is quite a dynamic picture maker, right? Very visceral camera, very strong and impactful. He goes into the editing room and he takes his favorite shot, the one that he maybe spent $50,000 on, some Steadicam shot, and he lays it aside and says, "I'm not going to use that." Now, that's killing your darling. I think it's also kind of like a ritual, like hopefully the editing room gods will see that I'm doing this and make it all good, free, happy sailing from now on. So we're going to look at how, we become aware of what's not working, and then we immediately try to take it into action. But there's something in the process of accepting what's there and really being curious about it, and how to take the story deeper, or the characters deeper. And, one thing I forgot to ask, how many of you are documentarians? Okay, well, I learned everything I know about drama through documentary, because you can't script it. So you definitely are using the juice of a real human being to take it deeper. Teaches us a lot. Okay. This is one of the major problems I find that people have when they go to the editing room. They start showing the audience. It's not a showing, it's an experience. And now how do we do this? Let's see. Well, first we're going to find out what it does to us. Right? So showing, inherently, we corner ourselves into a rational way of thinking about things, and it affects our rhythms. How many of you have cut something? I feel like I'm a little bit too bright over here. If you could turn down the sound just a little bit. Thank you. How many of you have cut things and the audience doesn't get it? They don't see it. A lot of us, right? Because we're showing. And it's much more musical than it is actually pictorial. Well, first we're going to be like a child. I love this. That's Rabiger. So let me just introduce you to my dog. And this was my cousin's kid. When the dog died, he said, "Can I do this for you?" So I'm going to write. God, you got a fat head. Well, you got a skinny head. Well, you have no markings. Well, you only have a green line on you and something strange on your back. And I don't like you. Well, I don't like you either, but actually we belong together because I fit inside of you, see? Look. Now what are you going to complain about? Now what are you going to complain about, right? This is how kids play, right? They play like that. And eventually you're going to see these two personalities that I'm creating out of two bits of plastic, one soft, one hard. That's what we can do in film. We actually just need to be in the sandbox, kicking around sand and playing with the footage, not thinking it. People get into the editing room and they start getting rational. They ask a question that I find to be totally irrational in the editing room, which is, does it make sense? Does it make sense is not a question that makes sense in the editing room. I'll say that again. Does it make sense is not a question that makes sense in the editing room. And it's simply because we feel in the editing room. And it is like music. Does a composer ask you if you understood a piece of music? No. But you have great experience around a piece of music. The more knowledge you have about music, music composition, instrumentation, the more you understand things that are going on. And that might affect the way you feel it, but that's not who the composer is making music for. So it's a weird thing that we shift into this really, and award-winning, Oscar award-winning producers I've worked with, being obsessed with crossing the line. The 180, I'm going to just assume you know that. Or continuity. How many people, it's a rite of passage, have spent hours getting the close-up to the wide shot right? It's a rite of passage. We have to do it. We have to do it. But it's actually, if you analyze match cuts, apropos of this, you'll find that they're either overlaps or ellipses. And because if you cut actually right, if you cut right for the continuity that looks right optically, it bumps you. And then you figure out that you have to actually change it. But I ask myself the question, why do we do this? Why, when we enter the editing room, do we all of a sudden get like, the director's back there going, does that make sense? I don't know. So we got to put in something else that says that's why she's doing that, you know, and it's like, whoa. Muddies it up. And it is because it is where, the chicken comes home to roost, but it's also that we're under the impression that editing is what we see. It's not what we see, it's what we feel and experience. So I'm gonna, it's abstract now. I'm gonna give you a clip very shortly so that we can start going further into it. Editing is like, okay, I love this one. These are the misconceptions that I've come up with so far. Continuity is of primary importance. How many people felt that? How many people still feel that? Oh, come on, admit it. Okay, match cutting is essential to making film work. Story always needs to be clear and motivations understandable and logical. Yes, right, no. A little, there has to be an emotional logic, but emotional logic is not mind logic. Let's see, what else do I have here? Doctor, Professor Walter Murch. Wrote a book called In the Blink of an Eye. Actually, it was a lecture in 1994 in Australia. How many people know this book? Excellent, keep it handy. Because he did give us this one thing to cut for. And he always said, you have to, it's top down, right? Emotion is always the most important thing. So now let's explain what that is. Okay, I'm just going to list them and then I'm going to go over them. Okay. How many of you have had actually that moment where there's a line of dialogue that just does not ring true, or an action that does not ring true? Now, if you're a writer-director, you're not going to want to lose your line because it's a darling and it's hard to kill the darling. But unless the line is, I see dead people, I don't know why you would need it, in that category of stuff, right? You want to just why do you need it? And God gave us digital, or the powers that be gave us digital, in order to make the edits. That's a great thing. It's not like in the day when we were cutting film. You just make the edit, you take it out. I was speaking to the talents earlier, the editing talents, and I just want to say it here, is that it's really important to make big changes, not to frame fuck. Make big changes. Move scenes around, discover how the energies are flowing and hitting each other. You cannot plan that. You can't plan it on script. You certainly can't plan it on set when you're actually locked into your actors. Another thing I was mentioning earlier, Brad Pitt coming onto the scene in Thelma and Louise. When he leaves, and then leaves for good, all of us are like, can't we just go with him? We're not thinking it, we're feeling it, because he was really a spark on there. You cannot plan that. You can know in casting maybe, but okay, then you already have that there. Then you take in the editing room, and you have to, anyone see In the Cut, Jane Campion, Mark Ruffalo, and Meg Ryan? There's a sex scene towards the end. She's not quite sure if he's a killer or not. He's a cop, so she has him handcuffed to a radiator in a New York City tenement. But it gets kind of hot between them, so then they have sex. If you look at the scene, it's all on him. Because Meg Ryan, she is the wonderful girl next door and, Sleepless in Seattle, but she's not really like sex juice kind of material, right? Sorry, just have to call it as it is. But Mark Ruffalo, on the other hand, is. So if you look at the scene, it's really cut more on him. Now, you don't know that going into the editing room, but you have to honor it if that's what's actually sparking up. So that's emotion. Story. Okay, the difference between story and plot is, this is from E.M. Foster. Plot is, the queen is dead, the king is dead. Story is, the queen is dead, the king died of a broken heart. So it has that element of the emotional coming through it. Rhythm in relation to story and from scene to scene. How many of you have cut scenes when there's too much denouement, there's too much, it just goes down, and then, or you go to black, right? Going to black can be deadly, because you go to black, you've got to come up from black, right? So how do you, I'm just going to use this for a second, how do you raise it to go up opposed to flat across? right? As DPs will know about you don't want flat compositions. Eye trace is the 180. It's also that our eye travels across the screen in a Z form in the West, at least. So if you're going to hide something down here, it's not going to be seen so easily. Or when you have your eye is focused here and the next shot is supposed to go here, it won't necessarily travel, which would then affect your rhythms if you're going to hold it more in order to see it. Again, all this, we're going to have a clip from Bonnie and Clyde. We'll unpack it further. Two-dimensional space is composition. And also how do you create, for instance, rule of thumb in a chase is that you're always cutting it. The camera is going on 90-degree or 100-degree axis changes. That's how you create a sense of moving through space on a three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional plane. That would be one of the things. So are you confused or are you not following going through space, right? Very often we also get caught up on that in the editing room. It's like, I don't know, how did he get there? Well, we have to show that. Show. If there's one word that you might want to like totally leave at the door when you enter an editing room, it's the word show. And in fact, when we're taught screenplay writing, they say, don't tell, show. When we go to editing, we don't show, we experience. It helps you really get into this thing that you realize that when you're showing, that talking down to the audience is really a stance where you want to move that back into that kid-like thing and just be there, right? Be there just playing with it. Be there like, oh, what's next? And oops. Okay, I went too quickly. Three-dimensional space is simply continuity, spatial continuity. I'm here in a wide shot, then I'm like here in a medium-long shot. You can, it's like, uh-oh, or, right, or the cigarette, you know, all that stuff. So Walter Murch gave us percentage points. Okay? Just take this with you when you're in the editing room and you're spending time on these things over here. You realize that it's these three that are really what make or break your film. And mostly this one, right? 51%. Nothing adds up to the emotional. So when your head is going into being rational and trying to figure it out, you could use this instead of like doing it to the material itself, that you sit back and you just take a moment. So now we're going to go to the first act, first 10 minutes of Bonnie and Clyde. I have a trick question for you. Follow whatever you can. See what's not working or working as far as continuity and spatial relationships and whatever. But for the very beginning, we're starting at the very beginning. My question to you is, why does the music start where the music starts? And with that, let's go to the movies. Okay, good. Anyone want to just shout out stuff that you saw that, before I go to the music, that wasn't working or was a mistake? Yes? The shoes. Anyone's noticed the shoes? When she goes down the stairs, she's got those big clunkers on, and then she's walking on the sidewalk. They look like little, what they used to give us in airplanes, slippers. How about Warren Beatty's Out of Focus Eyes in the cafe, right? Did you care? Who cared? All the way through you cared, or you stopped caring? All the way through. You're DP. I don't want to cast aspersions, but I just thought you might be. I mean, you know, because sometimes, depending on what discipline, it's totally fair. You know, we have our focus, and we got to see. Who else did it disturb the whole way through? You. Okay, so we have out of 200 people, we've got 1%. This is important because in the editing room, we have to make these decisions, right? Do we take care of this, or do we like understand that the flow of film is going to take us along? Yes, sir.
I felt something funny happened when you put this shoe on the fire hydrant.
The cut there. Do you want to see it? Then she dropped, right?
I don't know what, I can't place it though.
Yeah, okay. So that was the match cut, if you will, of him putting his foot up, and then it could be an angle, it could have been any number of things. Yes, sir.
Yes, I don't consider it mistaken, but there were a couple of things like little jump cuts when we see for the first time Bonnie, and it kind of changes that 180-degree rule, and we don't have a lot of spatial
Signposts, recognition.
Yeah, so it kind of jumps from her to her.
Right.
And it's a bit confusing, but it really is emphasizing on her lips that there's this whole phallic situation.
Okay, now we're going to analysis of it, but that's okay, because I just want to thank you for making the introduction. I just want to tell you, when Jack Warner saw this film, he was known to get up when he didn't like a film to pee a lot. But anyway, when he saw this film like had its 2-week run, and if it hadn't gone to Cannes, it would have totally died. He was not interested. The head of the studio was not interested in this film. In fact, this is a quote of what he said about the editing. Quote, "That was the worst piece of shit editing I've ever seen," unquote. Dede Allen, who went on to do wonderful films with Lumet. In fact, Lumet used to go into the editing room and use grease pencil and talk about using an editor as a pair of hands. He would do this. Dede Allen would come in at 6 o'clock, do some cutting, and go, "Hey." And when he came in at 9, I fooled, "Do you want to see it?" You know. "Oh, okay, well, that's not so bad." You know, so she knew how to work her way around any different type of director. Andy Coates, by the way, who started off by cutting Lawrence of Arabia, worked with Lumet, and the assistant who I had met actually asked her, "Why are you doing this? I mean, you're an Oscar-crowned editor, and you're coming here, and he's treating you like a pair of hands." And she was British, and I can't do the accent well, but I'll just, "Well, you know, 6 months New York, I get to go shopping, I get paid." Right? So it's good, an editor's personality is good just to like go with the flow and see where the positive aspects are. The jump cuts was one of the reasons. It had never been used before. And anything else, by the way? Okay, let me just run to the music for a little bit. Yes?
There's a hole in the dress and on his jacket when they get out of the car right after they left the village.
Right. It's all good, right? So we have definitely costume stuff happening, yeah? When they're outside the house. When she's upstairs and he's downstairs.
No, when she comes out. When
Sorry.
she comes out, the eye line doesn't match.
The eye line, yeah. It's also wonky when she's up there in the bedroom.
Yeah, that too.
Right? Yes. That jarred you. So obviously when we sit here, and you are an amazing audience because you're really paying attention, whereas like most audience, after 3 minutes, they're so in the film, they don't give, they're like, what are you making me look for? What? I didn't see that. Some of you might be like that. It's like, ooh, they saw all that? I didn't see that, right? I saw this and this, and which makes me come to mind is that wide shot, that extreme wide shot. Remember the feeling of the extreme wide, right? They're there, but you don't have the gumption to use it. Watch, wait here, watch, and he steps out, and then it cuts wide. That physical hit that you get is what we love in film. There's on a deeper thematic level, they've been flirting. This is the time they're walking out, he's walking out, and affecting society. It's not just them together, right? But it just that, every time I see it, it's like, right? And it wasn't even going close up to wide shot. By the way, close up to wide shot is like the golden mean. You know, the golden mean in math, 1 to 1.66. the ratio between, in a spiral, between the lower arm, the upper arm, and the vase. In film, it would be the juxtaposition of a close-up to an extreme wide. There's something that just, it has juice to it. It doesn't have to have meaning, and it doesn't even have to have, per se, a particular emotion, but it just gives you, it invites you in as the audience. But there's big and small stuff here. Let's go to the music. Why did the music start where the music started? It started on a cut, you say, yes?
Yeah. Because in that moment the story starts.
It's on a title, in that moment the story starts.
And their journey, when they left to the car, after the...
No, the music of the title sequence. Why does the music start in the title sequence? Yes. Emphasize the name. It's a good guess.
I think there's a basic reason, which is that there's this repetitive rhythm of the slideshow, and in a way, it's out of boredom. I mean, it's something to offset the repetition.
Well, that's why they would put music in, is necessarily to give it another level so that you're not caught in this metronomic. Yes? Yeah, no, it starts actually on just titles of actors. I mean, it's a good guess.
Maybe this is a basic answer. It just grabs your attention from the get-go. The passion.
It grabs your, yep. Grabs your attention from the get-go, you said, yes?
Because we're also seeing the photos, it starts their journey from before the movie starts, and then as the movie's going along, when they're in the car traveling, the music is very similar. So I think it's like symbolizing their journey starting.
See, this is what I love about you guys. I mean, we are such, I'll get to you in a moment. We make up story where there's nothing to make up. We overthink. How many of us overthink in the editing room? That's what I mean about being a kid, dumbed down. You know what I say the best way to edit? Forgive you, I apologize to you who are sober people, but hungover without a headache. You know why? Because you can't think. I once had a guy in Texas look at me at a bar and went, "You think too much." I felt like a really hyper Jewish woman from New York. But we really want to try to come from our belly. Yes, sir, you wanted to say something? Well, that is a little bit too arbitrary. I mean, feeling right is not a bad idea, but here it is. It starts where it starts, and it slides in because it's a song. And the problem with songs, when you have repetition of refrain, it actually, the song is going longer, but it's actually getting thinner, right? So it started where it started because they wanted it to end where it ended. I'm in the mood for love. That, and her lips are at us, right? And she turns to the mirror. Does that make sense? A woman doesn't do this and be satisfied unless she's looking at a mirror. But she's looking at the camera, and then she turns towards the mirror. Does that make sense? No. Do any of you have had that thought when you were watching this that didn't make sense? Do you understand why asking the question, does it make sense, doesn't make sense? Because it's like, okay, we can't do it because it doesn't make sense. I mean, imagine just like the contortion. Oh, I can't, I won't. All right, so what do I have here? So we're going to go back to that, and then we're going to look at some things in Bonnie and Clyde. Oh, look, I know what's happening next. Okay, so there I have a question for you. And I'll ask it now, but I don't want you to answer the question yet. Why, in the cafe, why does he have her change her hairdo? Don't answer it yet. How many people saw it, by the way? How many people saw it? Okay, let me count hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, about 7%. How many people don't know what the fuck I'm talking about? Come on. most of us. What's the, I'm not going to ask what the it is. Let's just move a little bit ahead over here to, there we go. So this comes from actually stage. This is, when I talk about the musicality, this is one of the things to keep in mind. The first time is something, let's say the curtains open and you see the bottle. You don't see the bottle, you only see, that's the foundation, that it's there. You see the bottle when I go and pass the bottle. And then you understand that I will be drinking from the bottle after I pick up the bottle, or more appropriately and more dramatically, if there is a gun, you don't see it until somebody walks in, passes the desk, then you see the gun, and then somebody else walks in angry, and you understand that that gun is going to be used. This is the way we draw audiences in, right? Because it's just information until it becomes an engagement, right? The art of exposition is really an art form. How you start your film, how you invite your audience in. So that's a basic foundation recognition. So it's like a chord, like one time saying something. How often have you, as I asked you before, you put something in your shot and your audience doesn't see it? Because once is not enough. It will only happen really in the third go-round. And how you mold that, how you sculpt that, and it's not just in script, though they do it here in script, and also it doesn't work. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I went too quickly. Okay, we'll go to the it. What is the it? What's the it that I asked? Did you see it in the cafe?
The waitress, yeah.
Right, the spit curl on the waitress, right? Change that. He has looked at the waitress. There's a spit curl. There's a whole line of waitress here. I just gave it away. But how do you know? How do you first know that she's a waitress? What?
She's serving coffee.
No, not her waitress. How do you know that Bonnie's a waitress? Yeah, I just showed that, yes? Right. Most people feel that it's when he actually is walking with her saying, what are you, a lady mechanic, a maid, a waitress, right? But actually, I gave it away, and this was when you originally see it, is in the title, right?
You go to work, huh?
Then you have this scene.
What kind of work you do?
None of your business.
I bet you're a movie star. Huh? A lady mechanic?
No.
Maid?
What do you think I am?
A waitress?
Right? That's when most people feel that it's happening. Then you have the next scene.
All right. If all you want's a stud service, you get on back to West Dallas and you stay there rest of your life. You're worth more than that, a lot more than that, and you know it, and that's why you come along with me. You can find a lover boy on every damn corner in town. It don't make a damn to them whether you're waiting on tables or picking cotton, but it does make a damn to me.
By the way, just apropos continuity, everybody saw her arm up and then her arm down in that scene? No, some people didn't see it. There's a lot of continuity. It's great. I mean, my brother used to love watching films telling me all the continuity errors, and I was like, wow, I'm glad you really enjoyed the film. You know, it made him feel good. That's another way. You could do a whole film with continuity errors just for those people who love to watch films to like say, see, I saw that. That is so sweet. So if you notice, I mean, this is good script writing, and this is how you actually, they're unpacking it then visually, except for that fucking spit curl, right? She corrects him once, and then she's on camera, right? Everything he's right. It's like he worked in a cement factory. That's on his face as she's saying it off camera. And then you put on your white uniform, pink. That's on her, pink. That accentuates that this is the only place he's wrong, right? Everything else he's right about, because in one place he's wrong. opposed to if he was just wall to wall giving her this information. And then, most importantly, when he says, and you get up every morning and you wonder when and how is this ever going to change, it's on her face, which is almost in her head, which is actually what we experienced at the very beginning of the film in those jump cuts, was when and how is this ever going to change. So that's really nice writing and really nice kind of coming to rest, except then we have the fucking spit curl. Can you imagine? Now, this is a director who did write. He camouflaged big eyes, big teeth. He put chewing gum in her mouth, too. Now, how could have they solved this? They're sitting there, and there's only 7% that get it. You know, I was, after years, I'm like going, why does he do that? Now, they could have cut it out, just change that. We don't need to see the waitress. But this is the waitress arc. There's a whole arc. He does not want her to be a waitress because she doesn't want to be a waitress. How do we fall in love? We fall in love when we see seen by the other for who we really feel we are. If we had taken it out and he just said, change the spit curl, it's like Svengali, the guy who wants to change the woman just to be the way he wants the woman to be. Does this make sense? As I say it, it does. But are we looking at it going, does this make sense? No, we're just experiencing the truth of these characters as they interact with each other and as they unfold for us. And we have to be truthful moment to moment. So I'm going to do this. This is an uncomfortable moment for some. Yeah, right? I know, it's okay. I'm just going to look in your eyes. Is that okay? Okay. And then just keep breathing. It's okay, I'll breathe you too. And something happens. It's not quite there yet, but it's, yeah. Right? Right? That is real. That's truth. That's deepening. That's what we do when we cut together film. When we just show, we're not deepening. We're just showing. We're staying at a safe distance. We're getting all up in our heads about how it's supposed to be read. It's not an essay. And as I tell my students all the time, your films do not come with instructions. Like, this is what you should feel now. Thank you. It's not easy. So we're back in the editing room. They're like, they could have intercut the scene, by the way, this shot. But they might have well just have put a red line on the film going, look, spit curl, spit curl, spit curl, right? They could have changed the rhythm, according to Walter Murch, that is not what we should do. But they let it be. Can you imagine? You're just sitting, how many of us have had that in the editing room where it's like, I don't have a fucking clue, but my gut tells me I should leave it. Right? Then there are those of us, and I had to go through this phase, where we eviscerate, where we take out the guts, where we take out everything, including those moments, because we're trying to get it right. And what our job is to feel it. And, well, before I go, let me see what time it is. Oh. Because I could jump ahead, but I'm going, and how we feel it. I mean, one of the ways is to look at what Walter Murch, gave you, and I have other screens afterwards, but I think I will take this moment to go to the next clip, where we're going to look at a scene from Jaws. Everyone see Jaws? I didn't, by the way, talk to you about Bonnie and Clyde. You guys saw Jaws? Who hasn't seen Jaws? Okay, well, this is after a big shark attack at the beginning of the film. Spoiler alert, there's a shark. Now, there's a lot that happened. I don't know if you know the backstory of Jaws, but, Spielberg thought his career was over. They had all these rainy days. In fact, one of the line producers talked in an interview about how they did something illegal because the insurance people came and they lied, which is illegal, about being on schedule. They were fucking clueless. They were rewriting the script on set. Richard Dreyfuss talks about being on the plane with Spielberg, and he left the B unit back there to do the end of the film. I'm not going to tell you what that was, but they shot it. And he thought he was having a nervous breakdown, which he was. He thought it was the end of his career. They also had two, not one, but two mechanical sharks, and both of them didn't work. So Verna Fields, who ended up cutting the film, and she was referred to as Mother Cutter, you know, you're going in there, you want to go, this is what I mean about big changes, right? It's like I need, you know, instead of like frame fucking or really torturing yourself, what is the extreme opposite of like showing something? Not showing it. Suggesting it. And how do we do that? I mean, also then there's like John Williams talks with Spielberg about the music that he made. Dun, 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 dun. You know, when Spielberg heard it, he thought this guy had gone a little batty. You know, it's like, I'm going to use that, you know. But it all came together, right? And it all comes together in Home to Roost in the editing room. So we're going to look at 3 scenes here. It's about 9 minutes. And let's look at continuity. Let's look at, again, music, when it comes in, when it comes out, and whatever else strikes you. Production design is very interesting in this one, too. Oh, I have to do that. Oh, before I leave Bonnie and Clyde, I did have to mention some stuff before going there, to the jump cut scene at the beginning, right? She gets out of bed, and then we go to a shot at the window where we see Clyde below, right? That is a POV shot, used as a narrative shot. So any of you ever think that you can only use POV as POV, you're wrong. There's nothing that's, you know, in the book of whatever that says POV is only POV. Many, many, many of you, and I find this over and over again, is that people need to motivate the POV shot. Like they wait, they hold. The shot's already dead and over, but they need to wait until the person does this in order to motivate the next shot, which is a POV. No, you do not need to do this. Like you don't need the mirror when the lipstick's going on. And it's also very important because if we had seen Clyde when she went to the window for the first time, I like to say the title of the film should be Bonnie and ... Clyde, right? It's when you open up the narrative space, which is we know something that they don't know for a fraction of a moment, you're inviting the audience in. And this is, again, you can only go to that space when you get out of showing, when you get out of this thing where you're trying to show the audience, when you go into this thing about experiencing together. Make sense? Good. So, let's talk about that scene. Okay. Continuity. Obvious continuity issue, yeah.
We go from the night scene with them frame the daytime back to daytime, and then back to night. Obviously doesn't happen in real life.
Right. Everybody saw that, right? They're there throwing the roast in, then they go to him. Actually, you know, when she walks in and he gets scared, that scene of him looking at the book was before then. That's show and tell, right? But they could actually get their cake and eat it too, have him be jittery, and then go to this very, I'll show it to you without the music, because objects through water don't tend to be threatening because they don't move very fast, right? So it's the music that helps create the sense of the imminent danger with the shark there. Also splitting the scene. They simply split the scene. They put in him looking at the book where they actually start the music. And those pictures get progressively more scary, right? And also that's where in that book, in that shot, you know, with the shark with the tank of air, that's where they got the idea for the end of the film. Spoiler alert for any of you who haven't seen the film, right? So, I mean, really, they did not have any fucking clue what they were doing, and they were just putting it together in the editing room. So we had the light continuity. Anything else? So let's go to the, I'm going to just go, I want you to notice, I'm going to jump ahead if I can on this. And when he's sitting there in this room, a couple of things that are just simply Spielberg also having fun. When we see Quint, who is the guy with the shark, with the nails on the board, the camera is actually swimming in. And he is, spoiler alert, the guy who gets eaten by the shark at the end, right? He's got issues with shark. He's got serious shark issues. And he's a shark like himself. By the way, it was the actor's decision to eat the cracker and talk like that. But we're going to look at that scene, that interchange, because if you listen to the dialogue, there's actually a whole chunk that is removed. There's also the editing there is something that disturbs most of us, which is going from a still shot to a moving shot to a still shot to, it's going back and forth. So try to get both the images as they're going, because when we look at it, usually when we're editing, and it bumps us a little bit, then we make a whole thing about it that we can't have it. We come up with rules. So let's see if I can...
Alex Kintner is the kid who was missing at the beach. His mother says it was a shark.
We don't even know that there's a shark around here. Oh, look, I can't argue with you. I can't talk to you. Larry.
I just want to show you the swim in. By the way, he says only for 24 hours, and then he says it again. In the script, it's only for 24 hours once. She uses it twice. And then he says, I didn't, first he says only 24 hours. I didn't say that, only for 24 hours. Right, it allows to expand there. See? Little swimming in. Just having fun, okay.
Your business is on a paying basis. But it's not going to be pleasant. I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. And you got to make up your minds. You want to stay alive and ante up? You want to play it cheap? Be on welfare the whole winter. I don't want no volunteers. I don't want no mates. There's too many captains on this island. 10.
You got that ellipsis there? There's this moment between them. There was actually dialogue. They took away the dialogue and they allowed us just to feel he's responding. Like, I don't want you. I'm doing this alone. It's between him and the chief. I'm going to let this play out and then he's going to leave. I want you to look at the mayor and where his eye line is. Because the scene actually ended in the shoot with the guy leaving. But in the editing room, because transitions are magical and they actually create the relationships, they flipped it. They have the mayor say, thank you, we'll take that under advisement after he's actually left. And you'll see that by his eye line. But what they do is that then they give the last word to Quint with a response, an emotional response from Rod, or I forget the character's name, actually. One of the things I did not stop for is that in the first part of that scene, at the end of it, he says, can we go home now? Right after they throw the roast in. Does that make sense? They just threw the, right? Doesn't make sense. But it's part of the joke that then ends over here. By the way, also, they get up. If you analyze it, the water keeps on rising. The water line is always the threat of the shark. It's been already established from the very beginning of the film. But the water keeps on rising on the camera. And it's the squeaky sneakers and the rising and the music that, and the voices agitated that make that so compelling. Without that, so I love to take it back to the editing room. They're sitting there in the editing room before John Williams has composed, because John Williams only composes to the cut stuff. He doesn't give anything beforehand. He might play something, and there they are with this footage that is truly not threatening, right? It's like across, it's in the slow through water, but you've got to believe it. That's truly what we have to do in the editing room is believe. And if you're a director who doesn't believe and only comes in and vomits everything that you hate about everybody that made you fail up until this moment, obviously on set, onto your editor and into your editing room, you're not doing service to anybody, not to yourself, not to the people who gave their souls in front of the camera, and certainly not to your editor. Any questions? Anything you noticed that you'd like to comment on? Because I'm going to open it up to the floor in 3 minutes after I go through. Okay, this is what we do. This is another way of approaching being in the experience and not showing, is that we're like actors. We actually know what's going to happen next, right? But an actor has to be in the flow of emotion in order to, or listen, right? That's another thing that experiencing is and not showing. Showing doesn't listen. You got to listen. You got to listen to your footage. You got to listen or speak subtext to your characters. Like speak Bonnie's subtext to herself as she's lying there. That will give you the rhythms organically and take you away from showing. So, like living and not knowing, like actors, we know what's coming next, but exercise being in the moment. We do create magic. Okay, principles of 3. This is what I asked myself. This is also very handy when you're doing documentary. Very often in documentary, you've got similar scenes happening. And how do we build? And how do we choose? So I ask myself these questions. Does it move the story forward? Does it develop the character? Does it reflect the theme? Actually, I would change it. Does it develop the character? Truly, if you follow character, you will have your story. And following character, as I was saying actually earlier to the talents, is one of the things to keep in mind about Hamlet. Even though we know Hamlet in To Be or Not to Be, or poor Uric, I knew him well, we actually know Hamlet in his relationships, from his relationships. To Gertrude, his mother, that he's seducible. To Ophelia, that he could feel love and also betrayal. To Polonius, that he's actually capable of killing. We only really learn who we are through our relationships. And in film, more so, because it's not an intra, it's not like the novel, it's more an inter. It's just something to keep in mind when you're lost. I mean, that's all it is. Walter Murch is there to touch on going, I'm not nauseous anymore, you know, and this might help as well. Oh yeah, I do only have one rule. Now, how do you know what works? And this takes us to test screenings. This is what feedback screenings. This is not for producers and how to sell your film. This is for you to actually experience as directors, as producers, as editors, how your film is landing. So what's very important here is for them not to ask questions for 20 minutes. They have to tell you, most audiences don't like doing that because they want to feel that they got it right and that they know. But you really want to know what they experienced, where they were bored, and this is the next title will be what that you asked them. No matter how painful, always thank them. To me, these are the important questions. And usually people point to H and it's happening at D. And whatever you do when they ask questions, you should not actually answer them because it dilutes the whole experience. This is where your film does not come with instructions, right? So, and then the only other thing I want to give you before we open up is I use this to refocus. You can get this from Michael Rabiger. He has expanded it, he's contracted it. How many people know Michael Rabiger's books? They're expensive little fuckers, right? They're great. So he uses this in developing story ideas as well as directing the documentary. He uses this as a thesis. I find it, you know how people mostly in documentary, they write reams and reams of like, why this film, blah, 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 blah. This is much, much quicker. And I'll give you something and you'll see what happens in your mind. Because as you fill it out, you'll hear interview questions, you'll see scenes. It just helps you find and refocus in the editing room, mostly in documentary I've used it, and also developing. So, in life I believe in unconditional love. It's always good to use aphorisms. I will show this by making a film on Rebbe Nachas, you saw him before, the wire-haired dachshund who's trying to save Susie from a broken heart. The main conflict will be between suicidal Susie and Rebbe Nachas, who not only does not know what biped love is, but he doesn't have thumbs. Ultimately, I want the audience to feel what a loser Susie is and understand that even losers deserve unconditional love. Right? So it's circling back, but you're getting a little bit of, well, I saw him there in a self-help doggy circle, right? Talking about like, God, why don't these humans do what we need them to do? And with that, I think we are back to the main title. So I would like to take this moment before opening up for everyone, as I'd like the editing talents of 2020 to please stand. They're shy ones. The ones who are here and who are being mentored this week, stay standing. And I want those of you who want to say so. Where's this mic? Okay. The question I posed to them that I wanted to have them share with us here, and I'm sure there are other editors here, but these were our talents, and you can take it on after they speak, is, let's start with Jacques, is do's and don'ts. This is for the directors and producers who have not had that much experience or only particular kinds of experience with editors. This is suggesting how to best interact with an editor. Is that a good idea? Are you curious? I'm curious, okay.
No, I can't throw.
Sorry, just need a moment to figure out how this works. Great. I suppose I'll just give a very specific piece of advice, particularly to first-time directors, or directors who are making their first feature films, I think. It's very easy, if you're a particular kind of person, a particular kind of creative person, when you're in the editing room, to want to, I guess, frame fuck, to use your term, very early on in the process. And I think, I think editors already appreciate it, and I think it's just a very efficient economical practice to respect the process of editing a feature film, which is a many-month endeavor, and you're not going to get it all perfect right away. And I guess this came out of a film I edited last year, a feature doc, where the director wanted to frame fuck the sort of opening 5 minutes of the film, and we wasted days and days on an opening that we never ended up using. You know, by the time we actually finally got around to assembling the rough cuts, we realized that's not the way to begin the film. So we wasted all that time. So I guess I just say, give editors the space to, give them the space and time to put the film together. And if everything is not perfect in exactly how you imagine it, don't worry, there's lots of time to get that right. And start with the broad strokes and moving closer. And this maybe sounds obvious, but on a feature film, kind of structuring your time in that way, I think is really important. So that's what I'd say, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, here we have, and then hand it to Laura.
Don't forget that we're a team, the director and the producer and the cinematographer and the editor and the sound designer and the composer, especially when it comes to celebrate the film on festivals. And, we are not just the users of the computer, we are a creative member or creative input that we are giving to the film. Yeah.
Okay, I would like to add to that, and we're never competing with you. We want to understand also your wishes and dreams and to work with it and work also with our wishes and be a team against the world and make together a film.
I think I would say if you're ever struggling to put a scene together, talk in emotion, give single words, and then let your editor try and express that themselves. I think it can open up really exciting different avenues that aren't always logical.
I'm going to actually ask the composers that are here, do you like also being spoken in emotional terms? Are they here? No? Okay.
That was actually something I learned.
From a composer, right?
Composer.
Yeah. Ati or she.
Okay, my suggestion is don't exhaust yourself and your editor during the process, and do take breaks during the day, and walks are very helpful. I think I used to work on a project that we ended up having almost, like it's a short film, but we ended up having one version per day, and then it's kind of like both me and the director got lost after a week, and then we are very exhausted. And I think one-nighters are sometimes helpful for catching up deadlines, but ultimately it's not very helpful. It's kind of like you save more time for one night, and then you kind of just waste a few days of mental energy. Yeah, I think it's important to take breaks and distance, even like stop for a few days, and then catching up afterwards, like maybe everyone will come up with better ideas.
Ati, right?
Okay. Well, my advice is to be patient, to be ready for seeing rock versions of a scene and imagine the possibilities from there. Also to be open-minded, besides what the script was, what you imagine it was maybe your first cut it was. The editing room is a space that you will never have during the shooting. It's a space with no one is pressing you. It's a space for thinking, a space for creating. So try to enjoy it also, and be prepared to do also homework, because you can do editing in the editing bay, but also outside of it, and bring ideas to try to the editing bay. So that would be an advice. And please ask permission for touching the keyboard or the mouse. Someone else?
Alberto and Alex and Christine.
Well, a lot of has already been said. Don't panic, indeed, if the first rough cut is not perfect yet. It's a process, and we can always try something different. I sometimes feel like, but I think it's different in different countries, I keep getting less days to edit, and I can fix it, I can do it, but it's better to have more time. You really need to have your time to, how do you say it?
Digest, metabolize,
digest,
yeah.
and then get new ideas when you are walking or in the showering. Okay, not all the time has to be paid. But you said yesterday, I really liked it. There are three things: the cheap, fast, good. You can only pick two of those.
You know that, guys? Fast, cheap, good. Choose two. Fast and cheap won't be good. Good and fast won't be cheap.
No, he doesn't.
It's an old saying. And Alberto, do you want? No?
No.
Anyone else? I was reminded of one thing that about, oh, good. Alex.
I write my advice.
Okay.
I think it's my advice in general for, especially for the director that developed documentary project. For me, is to listen the material, is to believe in the material, because because the material commands the film, because sometimes the director
imposes.
Yes, the material, the way of the material is distinct. It's important to talk between director and editor for work together.
Communication, yeah. And I'm reminded of one thing, and it's going to be opened up now to the floor to questions, comments. It's always good in the editing room, whether you're the editor or whether you're the director, to keep a notepad and always note down, even the weirdest, like if you find yourself cracking up at a joke that you had totally forgotten in the process of, this is to me the editing room gods. There are this flow that happens. We are truly, for me, in a state of grace in the editing room. And to be open to whatever little snippet of song, memory, whatever, and to note it down. It comes in handy. Sully, you didn't want to say anything? Yeah. Here, where's the mic? Oh, I thought I was going to get a no out of her. I love when she says no. Go and toss it, and somebody will catch it and throw it further. Wow, you guys are really, excellent.
Yes. Just don't try to tell the stories out of the frame from the set to the editors.
Right.
It's not necessary. Editors should be, far away from that point, so they can help you. So maybe you spend lots of money, or you had a problem with your actress, or it's not the editor's knowledge that know, okay?
Right.
This is, I can.
Thank you for that. It's either get a dog or get a shrink, and I just want to say, right behind you, and before you start, right behind you, Zelda, is, or does Laura want to say something? Okay. Walter Murch actually makes mention of that in The Blink of an Eye about not going to set. I'm going to go to him and then to you. Yes?
Yeah, I actually
Take the mic.
I was going to ask the editors, why do they not want to go to the set? Because, some directors like that, because if they feel that there's a missing shot or you need to get additional coverage.
Well, you can do that in dailies. You don't have to do that on the set. On the set, it's good to have a continuity person who does understand editing, right? When you have 3 setups that you've got to consolidate into one, you need to go into a powwow, director, DP, and continuity, and in order to know how to get that coverage and what you're actually tracking in that scene and what you've actually had covered. But you don't want to waste your editor on the set because they don't need to bring in all that shit from the set.
Sure.
It's too much. They need to be able to just have this material be pure in just what it is without all the psychological and technical and weather and pressure.
But sorry to belabor this a little bit, but
Go ahead.
Sometimes dailies don't cut it because you leave the location and you can't come back to it. So the editor can't. He or she doesn't have to be on the set. But in a green room or in the base camp, getting it fresh.
Or there's something else you can do. You can actually go over your shot list with your editor, which is always good. It's always good to have your editor look at your script before you shoot, because they will see things in a very cinematic way that you're not really necessarily imagining. And it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It's just that input's really very helpful. Showing your shot list and going over that. I'll give you a story about Do the Right Thing, Barry Alexander Brown, who cut it, and Spike Lee, who directed it, who's in it. There is, the riot scene where Mookie, or whatever his name is, takes the garbage can and throws it into the pizzeria. He shot it. It was not happening. He shot again. It wasn't happening. And he finally told Barry to come to set and direct it because he was in it as well. So it's a good point, very good point. And there are scenes where you don't need that, right? A love scene in bed, you're not going to need that, right, between 2 people. But action scenes, yes. But before you get the editor to come on set, I would do your shot list. I would maybe do even the most primitive storyboarding. You don't have to have a storyboard artist come in. But really, you have your overhead. You just use all the tools of paper that you have, and you go over that with your editor and on those pivotal scenes. Does that make sense?
Well, that's not the right question, right? Does that make sense?
We're not in editing room.
Yeah,
oh, I like you. Any question down here? working with editors. Well, now we're going over that. Okay, any editor here want to talk about editors in pre-production? Read script, obviously, right? You know, there's one thing I didn't have a card up here, and I will for next year. And I can't belabor it enough, and some of us already addressed it. It's this really essential element, and you're addressing it by actually inviting even somebody into pre-production, which is trust. You really need to trust the people you're working with, and your editor especially, because aside from your producer, your editor is the person you're going to spend the longest amount of time with as a director. And if you're a director-producer, it's with yourself, obviously, and a writer, and then, so you really, and I don't know, how do we generate trust? How do we, it's a mystery. What makes one person like another person? But you go, you have a drink, you have dinner, you talk about films. You go see films together, and you talk about what you just see. Spike did that with Dickerson before he did, I think, Do the Right Thing. If not, She's Gotta Have It. He really made a point of going with Ernie to the movies and just really just getting into the mud of what they liked and what they didn't like, and how it was done, and analyzing it, or I want to do it this way. And you can do that with an editor as well. You don't only have to do it with a DP. And editors will really, I mean, even saying it, it's just kind of my heart opens up, you know, because you're invited in a very special way, and you know that you're building this relationship that is really necessary. The trust is really necessary, right? Because, you know, in editing rooms, did you ever have this thing when you're sitting in the back of the editing room, and you're just like, and the editor's like, what did I do? What do you want? It's like we have like these sensors on the back that we're like sensing any movement. That's why I say if you don't like the editing room, it's really stay away from it. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, more questions? Can you? Okay. Or comments?
So, yeah. So how we work, we have an acting school, and how we work is that we develop stories with the actors, and we brought the DOPs 2 years ago, and 3 years ago we brought the editor in, and one of the editors that we invited said that he should not be there in the writing process, and then a very good editor, Murch, he said he wants to try that, and it was an amazing amount of information and work that the actors, the director, and the DOP learned from interacting with the editors, and I'm really curious why it's not this more promoted, you know, to actually have some sort of a connectivity and chat with the editor in the writing process.
It's a very good question. I mean, I was very, very shocked this year to hear, and that's why I wanted the editors to speak about how in the film schools I don't feel like they're really communicating what this relationship is about and how to honor it. And then somebody said, and I noted it down, that, you know, first rule of editor, don't take credit. So there's a certain ego thing that happens very often in the edit, and that's why trust is essential. That can happen in the edit room where people feel their baby's being taken away from them. The director can feel that this person's too involved. And also editors can get very involved and possessive, not in a bad way, sometimes in a bad way. You know, I mean, it depends. It's such a very intimate relationship. You don't have it with anyone else. But it's great to bring editors into the editing process.
We've learned a lot, I mean, and everything became very based on emotions and stories because each of us brought.
Right, and how a little goes a long way. I was quoting John Huston, who said, Hollywood, a golden age director, he said, give me one good scene in each of my 3 acts, and I have a film. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that happens here, and there's a lot of simplifying that happens in our storytelling, and a lot of trust. I mean, I'm talking about narrative here, in our actors as well. The other thing about editors is that some of us really don't want to give up the tricks of the trade, right? I mean, it's kind of, It's our little, when I write the book, I'm going to call it The Magician's Kitchen. By the way, editors, I want your recipes before we leave. Catch.
Yeah, in regards to that, I was wondering, like when I speak to with my editor and we go into scenes, why doesn't it work? Sometimes I use words as emotions and things about story, but also sometimes I act like the editor. Like, oh, maybe we should cut here. I was wondering, is that a problem? Or does it just
Is it a problem for your editor?
No.
Well then, no, it's not a problem. But don't assume that the next editor you work with. In fact, if there's somebody in the back who has their hand up and maybe a comment on that. Oh, something else. That's the only thing I got to say, that don't assume it's going to be in the next. I think it's really also important to sit down. Editors need to interview their directors. Like I would interview directors saying, well, what in this film was your idea or was your editor's idea? And see how honest they'd be. And I would ask the same thing from an editor. What did you do there that you really feel that, didn't make it in or made it in and that really made the film? And see if they have the, yeah, I made that happen. But if somebody's going to be all like, oh no, it was this collaboration, was really so perfect, it's like, fuck you, no, I don't, I mean, that's just me, I mean, maybe I'd just like to, I need my little evil side to have another, little playmate there. Yeah, so if it's good with your editor, but you can also ask your editor. Just simply ask, I just heard this, does this affect you? How, there's somebody behind you, and I just want to give you a story of a student that was working on a commercial, and he with producers coming out, it was just a commercial, right? But the producer came in and was like, I don't know, this and this and this, and change this. So he turned off the keyboard and he went, turned it back on and showed him the same thing that he had just shown him. And the producer was like, yeah, that's a lot better. I was like, no, you didn't. He said, yes, I did. I said, no, you didn't. I would never do that. I don't think I could pull it off, but I thought it was really bold.
So I wanted to ask you if it ever happened to you that you were in a process with a director and the director realized that, oh, I would like to shot a few scenes differently, and the director went back and shot something. It always happens to me that I'm in the editing process, know much better how I should have done this film, what kind of scenes are missing. Sometimes it's possible to change on an audio level or something. And in the documentary, it's easier, so that's why I also tend to make more docs at the moment than fiction. But I'm really missing this, being in a process and being able to go back and correct your mistakes or just do something a bit different because you know your film better. I write it, I shot it, and then in the editing I just understand things which I was not able when I was writing.
I mean, there used to be an award at the Academy Awards called the Irving Thalberg Award. He was a producer at Metro who died young, and Norma Shear's husband, actually. And he was known for actually looking at the cuts and sending them out for reshoots because they would rewrite endings. And this whole thing that we have now in film schools, where you have to have it so perfectly planned and don't think of a reshoot, is certainly coming from the producerial side, and it's valid. On the other hand, and I think the editors will agree, very often what directors think are mistakes are not mistakes. And very often people want to go and reshoot because of something that they feel misaligned, but they might not be seeing the bigger picture of what's working. And an editor can go in and truly save the cost of production to do reshoots. But again, so you see there's a whole, if you can afford it, go ahead and do it. But I would say to anybody who wants to reshoot, or when you get feedback on your script and you're totally confused, but you're going to totally approach it, I would use that tool in Life, I Believe, by the way, because you want to make sure you're not losing sight of your theme. And you want to see what is really the rudder that's holding this movement of this ship of story through the water. And if you're just changing colors on, of one of the sails, right? On the other hand, if it makes you happy and you can afford it, who am I to say no, right? But you want to also chart yourself as you go, like as you continue down, where you know your blind spots are, where you know your strengths are, and how willing are you to be in not knowing, and how willing are you to, and there, not knowing is the perfect place when you don't know, is to do test screenings. So there's Billy Wilder who did a test screening of Some Like It Hot in 1959. No one laughed. 600 people. No one laughed. The studio was like, fuck. We can't do cross-dressing men. It was 1959. We can't do this. No. Billy Wilder? Billy Wilder. He knew his audience, and he knew, let's try it again on a different day. And he did, and everybody laughed, and they were relieved. So, by the way, that means not one test screening, but the magic of threes, at least 3 test screenings. Never rely on one test screening. Never, ever rely on one test screening. You never know what it is, the makeup of people, where the moon is, and what planet, whatever, astrological, whatever. You don't want to rely on one test screening, right? And that's that's where I would do the trade-off. Because you might want to save your money for like a nice vacation someplace. Which reminds me of Fred Zinnemann, who did Julia. He also did High Noon. He was an Austrian Jew. After he did a shoot, he also did From Here to Eternity, which is an amazing film. Anyway, he went mountain climbing. He went mountain climbing, treacherous mountain climbing. And this allowed him to have perspective. This is life and death. This is Hollywood. Right? So we want to always, I think, just going back to that, really try to get perspective. And trust in the people who give you perspective. And one more question, and then we're out of here. Yes?
As a producer, I don't spend a lot of time hiring editors.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on documentary projects that are feature length, it's a big time commitment, so you want to, obviously align with the right person. And I've often been in a situation where I'm between directors who are not happy with the editors and trying to navigate that process and sometimes having to replace editors. So I guess I'm wondering from...
This is about a producer with hiring directors. Oh, well.
So I'm curious, often you have to roll the dice when you hire people. I mean, if you don't have the chance to spend a lot of time watching movies like Spike did with his editor, like you have to go on Vibe, you have to go on like someone's filmography. But I'm just wondering if there's something else that we're not, as producers or directors, thinking about that, from a longtime editor's point of view, what we should be, maybe questions we should be asking.
Well, why did you let go of the editor, the last editor you let go of? What was the specific reason?
It's complicated. I mean, we actually wound up having 4 editors on the film.
So that's the director then?
Yeah.
So the director needs to go through that. I mean, it's the director, and you need to be able to tell the second and third and fourth editor, he's still finding it. The subtext there is, you might or might not. And then you just need to also deal with how emotional the editor becomes about it. If the editor is an old, hack, understands like I am expendable, but I'm at least ka-ching, I'm getting my money, that's fine. But if the director is having the editor work 16-hour days because they're a young editor trying to prove their chops, by the way, all young editors work 16-hour days for the first 10 years of their career, more or less, because they're never sure that they're actually delivering, don't exploit that. That is not fair. So I think you as a producer, it's a great question, by the way. It's never been posed to me, and I'm loving it. I would just say you need to be the ethical weather vane. You cannot change the creative push and pull.
It's led me to think, and I've agreed with a director on a current project, to actually do a test period of like hiring an editor for 2 months instead of saying 7 months or 8 months up front.
Is that fair, editors? Yep. Test period? Nobody has an opinion?
I don't
think
know
that's
if it is
fair.
or not. I mean, it just is like one answer.
Yeah, we got to. Yeah, you're putting pressure on the editor, but it's at least good that it's out there, that it's like, we don't know. Transparency is very, very helpful. And then just keeping good editing room hygiene, which is good communication, which is good breaks, which is, not like stressing out the editor with like pressure for no reason, right? If you're asked for an assembly, or if you're asked for a rough cut and they only have an assembly, don't make them crazy by making a rough cut. Just say, well, we're going to show the assembly. Really allowing the space that you know of. And, the thing is, to quote a filmmaker friend of mine who also edits his own work, he likes to say that they can't pay us enough because we care. The editor is taking this film home. I just do consultancies now, and I'm still waking up with film images. I look at a film 2-3 times, read a script, do a breakdown and a structure rechange, and this thing is floating in me for another fucking 2 weeks. It's like, go away, go away. Won't go away. Editors, like, we live and breathe this. It just happens to be, so it's so close. And to really just kind of get that, if you do work with an editor who doesn't want to make a move until the director tells them, that's not a good editor. You want an editor that's actually, I have a vision, let me take in this film and give it back to you like a film, then you're working with a good editor. But if you're working with a timid, tends to be young, or just like somebody who likes to get paid for pushing buttons because that's how they've been trained or experience has been, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, it has been really, really great. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the festival.